presentation this morning. And our session this morning will be focusing on retirement planning. On behalf of the Director General, Human Resources, Ministry of the Public Service, and the Director, Learning and Development Directorate, I want to welcome everyone today to the first session in our webinar series on retirement planning. My name is Sheila Grisette, Senior Human Resource Officer acting at the Learning and Development Directorate, and I am your moderator for today's session. Joining and assisting me as co-host is my colleague, Ms. Faye Ann Jordan, Human Resource Officer, also with the Learning and Development Directorate. Before we commence this morning's session, I wish to share with you the rules of engagement. As much as is possible, please pause or minimize distractions so that you reap the full benefit of the presentation. As the facilitator makes the presentation, take some time to reflect on relevant issues you may wish to share. We want to hear from you. Any comments, questions, or queries you may have. A question and answer segment is included at the end of the presentation. You may share your comments, questions, queries, or observations throughout the presentation by using the Q&A icon at the foot of your screen. Your contributions will be shared with the facilitator during the question and answer segment, who will respond to you by audio. Please note that today's session is being recorded. The recording will be posted to the Learning and Development Directorate's YouTube channel. It is now time to meet our facilitator and presenter for today. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mrs. Gail Worrell. Gail Worrell is a seasoned professional financial advisor with a diverse skill set and a commitment to helping individuals and businesses achieve their financial objectives. With half a decade of comprehensive experience in the field, she has established herself as a trusted advisor in retirement planning, money management, risk management, and budgeting. She takes a holistic approach to financial planning, considering both short-term needs and long-term objectives to formulate comprehensive strategies that drive sustainable goals and prosperity. With a clientele of approximately 275 individuals and businesses, Gail has demonstrated her ability to cultivate lasting relationships built on trust, integrity, and genuine commitment to her clients' success. Whether guiding individuals towards goal achievement or retirement planning, assisting families with estate planning, or supporting businesses in achieving their financial goals, Gail provides personalized solutions that align with her clients' unique circumstances and aspirations. Outside of her professional endeavors, Gail enjoys volunteering her time to promote financial literacy initiatives and empower individuals to make informed decisions about their finances. She firmly believes in the transformative power of education and strives to empower her clients with the knowledge and resources they need to navigate the complexities of the financial landscape with confidence and clarity. Good morning and welcome, Gail. I now invite you to begin today's presentation.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for that warm introduction. And a very good morning to each and every one of you. I am super excited to welcome all of you to today's webinar entitled Retirement Planning Talks. As you would have seen on our first slide, episode 1 of 3, which means we have a lot in store for you relating to retirement. We cannot cover everything today, but there will be a lot of information being shared. All right, we do have an exciting session planned for you today, and I am thrilled to see all 122 of you on today's webinar. All right, so your engagement and your participation is what makes these events valuable, and I look forward to, a productive and insightful time together this morning. So thank you for being here, and let us get started. Now, the objectives of today's webinar focuses on helping you to understand the critical aspects of planning for retirement. So it covers various financial and personal factors that need to be considered, right, to ensure a comfortable and secure retirement. The session aims to educate attendees, yourselves, on setting realistic retirement goals, assessing financial readiness, making informed decisions. We're taking a look as well at the phases of retirement, understanding the basics of retirement planning, being able to determine what your retirement goals are, and taking a look at the importance of saving early for retirement, so that by the end of today's webinar, you should be able to have a clearer picture of what you need to do to achieve your retirement objectives. So the first thing we're going to get into this morning is the phases of retirement. And retirement is typically viewed as a major life transition. It's a journey that we plan for, we look forward to. It's a long period of time, right? And therefore, for the purpose of today's presentation, it will be broken down into several distinct areas, which we refer to as the phases of retirement, right? Now, each phase presents its own set of opportunities, its own challenges. And so what we need to understand is what happens during each phase and the importance of planning for it, not just financially, but also emotionally, mentally, and physically. So the first phase of retirement is the pre-retirement phase. This is the phase which we are currently in, where we have the opportunity to plan, we have the opportunity to invest, save, make informed decisions, and prepare for retirement. All right? Now think of pre-retirement as the time when a student prepares for final exams. The student gathers notes, they study hard, they plan, they schedule, etc. Now, what happens financially is that individuals start to seriously plan their finances by estimating how much money they need to live comfortably without a steady paycheck. Okay, now we're going to get into that a little bit further in the presentation, but then emotionally and mentally and physically, individuals start to begin to envision their post-work life, which can bring a mix of emotions. So some excitement, but also some anxiety about the unknown. So many start to take health more seriously, recognizing the importance of it, being fit to be able to enjoy retirement. Now, the importance of preparing for retirement in this current phase, which is the phase we are all currently living in, is to ensure that you have enough savings or your investments are accumulated or diversified enough to be able to support the desired lifestyle. And preparing for it then mentally and emotionally helps in adjusting your expectations and reducing stress. All right, so we want to be able to ensure that a healthy and active lifestyle can be maintained, and it can only be maintained if it is something that is started during this phase. All right, now phase 2 is the actual retirement phase. This is the day that all of us may be looking forward to. Dare I say right now, because as I speak to individuals, some persons say, well, Gail, I would love to retire right now. But is it realistic? Right, so this is like the actual graduation day now for a student, the formal process of ending one chapter and beginning a new one. All right, the transition now from earning to spending savings. And that comes along with a mental and emotional and maybe even a physical adjustment. Now, what does that adjustment look like? That adjustment may feel like some sense of finality, mixed emotions about leaving the workplace, adjusting to a daily routine that no longer revolves around work, right? No longer getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning because you have to. No longer going through, traffic in the morning, things of that nature, right? But more so ensuring that the transition to using your retirement funds goes smoothly, And then also adjusting to maybe a new identity that is no longer tied to your job, to your occupation, to your post, to your title. All right. So being able to establish new routines that keep yourself active and healthy and so on is what we look to plan for during the retirement phase. Phase 3 is what we refer to as the honeymoon phase. Now, typically, this is a term, honeymoon is a term that we often associate with the day, the week, the month, or even months after individuals get married. All right, so similar to a newlywed couple, you know, enjoying their honeymoon, retirees often experience an initial period of excitement, of freedom, of happy emotions, loads of excitement, and living out their plans that they would have made prior to getting married. And much like the honeymoon phase of retirement may be much spent on doing things that you may not have had the time or the resources to be able to do prior to retirement. So traveling, hobbies, leisure activity, visiting old school mates, travel, you know, doing the things that you may not have had the time to do before. And typically those activities may be higher due to having more time, or just the simple fact that it was planned and prepared for. Right? Now, mentally and emotionally, experiencing those high levels of joy and satisfaction and, you know, new experiences, the increased activity due to new adventures and new pursuits, etc., cause us to be on a high emotionally and mentally and physically for a certain period of time. Now, the importance of preparing for this specific phase financially, it means that you have to budget for it. You have to budget to ensure that this phase doesn't lead to overspending, or as the term goes, we adopt a spendthrift attitude, where we become excessively happy with, you know, swiping or tapping that card, being able to spend the cash that you know is available to you because it was something that you would have accumulated over a long period of time. Now, mentally and emotionally, you want to be able to make sure that while you're socializing and you're embracing and enjoying this period fully, you're still maintaining a balance to avoid burnout. All right, and that takes me to phase 4, which is the disenchantment phase of retirement. Now, this phase is experienced as a back to life, back to reality phase. And this is the post-honeymoon phase for our newlywed couple, where, you know, reality sets in, there are adjustments now to be made. This is, okay, we're settling into what is retirement, what is real life, what life will look like now for a very long period of time. So financially, realization that long-term financial management is important is something that we have to do and look forward to and plan for from the pre-retirement phase, which is phase 1, which is where we are currently, the phase we are currently in right now. Right? Now, oftentimes in this disenchantment phase, individuals may have feelings of boredom or lack of purpose may arise, and possible decline in activity if new routines have not been established because it was not prepared for. Especially what we want to be doing in the disenchantment phase is continuing to monitor and adjust your spending habits. So the same thing you're doing financially, planning during your pre-retirement phase, this is something that also must continue after retirement. Because as you seek new interests and meaningful activities and community events and spending time with family and friends and so on, you also want to make sure that your income or your savings do not run out quickly. All right, you want to make sure you're staying active, you know, to combat any potential health declines. All right, which typically comes along as we get older. Phase 5 of the phases of retirement is the reorientation phase of retirement. Now, this is like a couple finding their groove after the initial adjustments, settling, right? Where retirees now start to find new routines and new purposes. they're developing a sustainable long-term financial plan. So you may go back to budget, you may go back to the book to see, okay, this is now my settled lifestyle. This is where we're at. This is the reality of life. This is what's going to be happening for a very long time. How do we get accustomed to living at this level? Or being able to maintain this lifestyle with the income that we have or with the savings that are left. All right, you're finding yourself again, you're finding new passions, you're establishing new routines that maybe promote health. All right, you're ensuring that there is a balance between spending and preserving funds. You're engaging in the activities that allow you to maintain your health through those regular activities, as well as checkups, your doctor's checkups, making sure that you remain in good health, things of that nature. And phase 6, which is the final phase of retirement, is the stability phase. And this phase is akin to mature, stable relationships where both partners now have a deep understanding and contentment. So a steady state of managing and enjoying those funds is where you have this is what comes about now in the settled lifestyle. Right? You have now a consistent routine, being able to maintain your health, continuation of prudent financial management, and enjoying the fruits of long-term planning and stability. And now physically, ongoing engagements and being able to keep up with your regular health maintenance becomes now something that can be done for a very long period of time. All right, so if you were taking notes, that's brilliant. If not, you can take a photo of the screen so that you remember what each phase of retirement looks like. Now, as I would have mentioned, each retiree's experience is unique. And the timing and duration of each phase will vary widely from individual to individual. Now, what I want you to remember here is that planning and adaptability are key to navigating the phases from phase to phase, right, of retirement successfully. So you must plan, you must be able to adapt. And overall, we want to understand the importance of preparation financially so that it ensures that you have enough resources to support your lifestyle through all phases of retirement, which is crucial and important to avoid stress and to be able to enjoy your post-working years. Now, transitioning from a career to retirement involves significant lifestyle changes. So preparing mentally and emotionally helps with dealing with identity shifts, finding new purposes, avoiding feelings of disenchantment. And physically, health is a cornerstone of enjoying retirement. Preparing physically ensures that you can remain active, engage in your hobbies, activities, leisure activities, being able to travel, whatever you may have as your retirement goals, which we will get into in a bit, and to be able to have fewer health-related issues. So by planning for these phases, individuals tend to, ensure a smoother transition and a more fulfilling retirement. Now, this is a quote by George Foreman, where he says, "The question isn't at what age I want to retire, it's at what income." So let me repeat that again. George Foreman says, the question isn't at what age I want to retire, it's at what income. All right. So for some of you or for some of the individuals that we have spoken to in the past, and they said, well, hey, I want to retire now. I would love to retire now. And he asked at the beginning, is that realistic? That's what George Foreman is referring to here. Is at what income? Okay. Now, you want to run a poll. I know you probably think this is my favorite time of today's session where we're able to run a poll where we want to find out what your concern is as it relates to retirement. So you're going to see something pop up on your screen where you see a question. What is your biggest concern about retirement? And then you'll have a moment to answer the questions. So you can select the drop down. You just go, you click on select answer. And the drop down allows you to select one of four things. Run out of money. Is that one of your biggest concerns? Is it healthcare costs? Is it maintaining your lifestyle? Is it boredom or lack of purpose? And once you've finished that, you can hit submit at the bottom, and then we will share the result. Obviously, we would not be able to see who selected what, but what this does determine, or what it will show you, is that there are other colleagues who have the same concerns as you. All right. What's your biggest concern about retirement? So we give you another 10 seconds to complete that, and then we will go ahead and share the results with you. Okay. All right. So thank you so very much for sending in your results. Let's take a look now at the poll. Okay. So this is very interesting. This is interesting because you can see that 48% of you, your biggest concern is running out of money. And we're going to get into the importance of being able to save from as early as possible for retirement and the benefits of doing that, so that this curbs this concern about retirement as much as possible. 27% of you said healthcare costs, being able to maybe, maintain your healthcare and the costs that may come along with that, being able to maintain your lifestyle, 22% of you, and 3% of you, you're not so concerned about being bored or having a lack of purpose. You may have plenty of things that you want to do, and this may not be a primary concern. Okay, so this is very good information to have, right? This is great information to have. So let's continue. Where we go to the basics now of retirement planning. Now, retirement planning involves preparing for life after paid work ends. And not just financially, but in all aspects of life. So the first thing here is being able to set your retirement goals. And what does setting retirement goals involve? If you're taking notes, setting retirement goals involve determining the age that you wish to retire. Because what does that do? That gives us a timeline. That gives us a time frame in which to achieve your goals. All right. Secondly, we want to take a look at estimating the lifestyle that you want to maintain. So that will involve taking a look at your expenses, taking a look at your income, and what will continue during retirement. Considering potential healthcare needs and other post-retirement expenses as well. All right. Secondly, we want to assess your current financial situation. And why would this be important? Well, this is important because you want to evaluate your current savings habits. You want to take a look at your sources of income. We want to take a look at understanding your expenses, your debts, your liabilities, and being able to track your net worth. Now, net worth may seem as though it's a term that may be only used among the rich, right? And that is a myth. All net worth really is understanding or being able to calculate your assets minus your liabilities. That becomes your net worth. Okay. Thirdly, estimating your retirement needs. Why do we need to estimate our retirement needs? Is because we want to be able to calculate how much money we will actually need monthly, weekly, semi-annually, quarterly, yearly during retirement in order to maintain our lifestyle, right? To be able to do the things that we still want to do. We still want to dress nicely. We want to be able to afford healthcare. We may want to be able to travel, visit friends and family. We may want to be able to, enjoy life, go on a road trip, do a picnic with friends and family, go to a concert, attend some type of event, whether it's a musical event, whether it is crop over event. You want to still be able to be active enough and enjoy the lifestyle that you may currently be enjoying. All right. The fourth one, would be researching your retirement savings options. So being able to understand now what you need, you want to find out where can I put aside money? Where does it make sense for me to take a look at, okay, if I were to put aside $25, if I were to put aside $200, what makes the most sense for me to do that? Is it the credit union? Is it an insurance company? Is it a bank? Is it with the central bank? Where does it make the most sense to put my savings? Is it under the mattress? All right. Where does it make the most sense? Do I put all my eggs in one basket, or does it make more sense for me to diversify? I am not here to give you financial advice. I'm here to show you that there are different ways of being able to save. All right. Understanding Social Security. What does this look like? So understanding how your Social Security benefits work is important, because then you need to understand what needs to be added to Social Security in order for you to be comfortable. All right. Understand as well, not just the income side of Social Security, but the eligibility side of Social Security. At what age would you be eligible for early retirement, contributory and non-contributory benefits? What does that look like from age 60, age 65, age 67, age 68 and a half? Some changes are currently being made, and we want to be able to understand how does that affect you and I. All right, that comes with a little bit of research. Healthcare. Considering your health insurance options. Consider and evaluate long-term care planning. Will it call for out-of-pocket expenses? Will my savings be affected if a health-related emergency came along? How do I prepare and plan for things like this? Estate planning. Now, estate planning, again here, a myth is associated with estate planning where individuals believe that estate planning is only for those that earn a certain amount of money or are considered as rich, right? That could not be further from the truth. Estate planning really involves, one, creating a will, two, establishing a trust if necessary, doing something as simple as naming a beneficiary on retirement accounts, savings accounts, insurance policies, having somebody there taking care of, maybe even setting up something like a power of attorney. All right, so that if you were to become mentally incapacitated or physically incapacitated, that someone else is there and noted to make decisions on your behalf. Okay. It involves also, if you have assets, if you have property, who is that property supposed to be gifted to, transferred to, sold to, etc., in the event that you were to pass away? Is allowing somebody to know those things. That's what's involved in estate planning. Now, for some persons, it may be a little bit more extensive than others. All right. And along the way, we want to be able to monitor and adjust along the way. You want to regularly review your retirement plans, your financial accounts, your financial situations, and make adjustments based on income changes, expenses, goals, stay informed about laws and regulations that affect your retirement planning. All right. Now, establishing your retirement goals comes with a step-by-step guide. So the first thing we want to do is to determine your retirement goals, which involves detailing an assessment of your future financial needs, right? Your lifestyle preferences, your current financial situation, etc. So the first thing here to do is to assess your current financial situation. And that comes along with listing your income sources. If you have more than one stream of income, make a note of it. You track your monthly and yearly expenses. Calculate your total savings and your current value of any investments that you may have. Also take a look at any outstanding debt, whether that's credit card, whether that's loans, mortgage, etc. Okay. Step 2 is to estimate your retirement expenses. So housing, utilities, groceries, transportation, insurance, medications, long-term care, things of that nature. Also include in your estimation things like being able to enjoy life, so hobbies, dining out, leisure activities, etc. And consider how inflation will affect your expenses over time. And we will stick a pin on that because we want to come back to that a little later in the presentation. Determining the desired age for retirement. Now, there is something that says that there's something called life expectancy, how long persons may live for. All right, now I'm not going to get into that too much because typically women tend to live longer than men. However, family history and family health history may have some type of consideration for how long you might live in retirement. So for those who are extremely healthy, they may live to 90, 100, 102, 105, all right? But for those who may have a family health history or may have a pre-existing condition, etc., you want to make sure that your health can be maintained as much as possible. And that involves maybe taking doctor's visits a little bit more seriously, engaging in activities and considered as exercise, etc., a little more often as well, once you are in a position to do that. All right, step 4 is to calculate your required income after retirement. How much do you need to be earning? Does it come from Social Security, NAS, pension? Does it come from private pension? Does it come from the bank? Does it come from annuities? Then we want to take a look at the gap, analyze the gap associated with income and expenses. And we will also go into that a little bit later in the presentation as well. All right, step 5 comes along with being specific. Be specific about your financial goals. So you want to determine how much you will need to save to cover any shortfalls. And decide on the type of investments, type of things that you want to be able to diversify your income into that it aligns with your risk tolerance and your retirement timelines. And plan to pay off any debts before retirement. You also want to plan for contingencies, plan for emergencies, because you reach age 65 or age 60 or age 67, it does not automatically mean that life will not happen. Emergencies will not come along. All right, because things will still happen. The home may still need maintenance. The vehicle may still get a flat tire. You may still have a medical emergency here or there. So you want to be able to take into account some of those things as well. All right, and you also want to review. Continue to review and adjust as life goes on. Now, this is a very true story. What I'm about to say to you, or say to you, is a true story, right? I would have met this 70-year-old Barbadian, who for the purposes of today's presentation, we refer to him as John, right? I would have met him and his wife at a birthday function on the 12th of February, 2022. And in conversing with him and his wife and those around him, I noticed that he was encouraging those in the room to look towards the future because, quote unquote, he said, it rushes up on you. All right. And one of the things that he spoke about was how he started saving for retirement in his early 30s. He put aside funds regularly and had diversified his income into things like agriculture and farming and some real estate and bought some land, etc. Now, John's goal from the time he was in his 30s, he said, was to retire by age 65 with sufficient savings, he said, to be able to cover things like his regular living expenses, take care of his health, be able to travel, and leave a small inheritance for his wife and 2 children. Now, by the time John had reached age 65, he had accumulated a substantial retirement fund. All right, and this is due to being consistent, being dedicated towards achieving his goal of savings so that he can cover his living expenses, healthcare, travel, and a small inheritance. All right, that was his goal. Now, he is now retired comfortably, and he is able to maintain his lifestyle, right, without financial worries. Him and his wife travel frequently throughout the Caribbean. They have made many, many trips to visit their children, recent grandchildren as well, who now live in UK and USA. Now, him and his wife enjoy leisure activities. They had always planned to do that, right? But when unexpected medical expenses arose, John's savings were able to cover the cost without straining their finances. Now, this story may seem all very well, all very dandy, because John is considered as some person who is financially secure, right? He's able to enjoy his retirement without stress. He's able to afford unnecessary medical treatment. He's able to maintain his standard of living. He enjoys traveling with him and his wife to visit family, and he can also leave an inheritance for his children as well. Now, there were some disadvantages along the way, because John would have had to forego certain luxuries, all right, and save diligently during his working years. Now, certainly the things that he would have invested in, agriculture and farming, and what was the other thing I mentioned? Real estate, right? Those things were subject to market fluctuations. It all depended on weather. It depended on a number of different factors, which could have caused some stress along the way as well. Though there was always some type of risk as well that John could outlive his savings if they were not managed properly. So you would understand that being able to save for retirement provides numerous benefits, right? Ensuring the financial independence, the ability to handle unexpected expenses. However, it required that level of discipline and planning, along with navigating the potential risk, such as market volatility for his farming business, his agriculture, knowing when is the right time maybe to invest in real estate, things of that nature. So the story of John really highlights the balance between preparing for a secure retirement and also enjoying the present, showcasing both the rewards as well as the challenges of retirement planning. So I'm not saying to you that there will not be challenges. There may be challenges, but there are also rewards. Okay? Now, there's some factors to consider here in John's story, because now you understand that John may have had a certain lifestyle while he was working, but he now also enjoys a certain lifestyle now that he is retired. Okay? He would have had his dependents who depended on him and his wife while they were working. But now John, if he were to pass away, he now has something that he can leave for his dependents, who would be his wife. His children may no longer depend on him, but he intends to leave something there for his grandchildren. All right, his expenses and his obligations continued even after he retired. There may have been debts at some point in time, but he no longer has debts after he retired, because he was able to plan and adjust and make adjustments and monitor those adjustments along the way. Monitor his investments along the way. Monitor his business, his spending, his savings habits along the way. And health, while it may have been maintained as much as possible during his working years, you would also understand that a medical emergency did come up. So it's much like planning a road trip where, planning, you have a destination. There's some place you would like to get to. There's a goal that you want to be able to achieve. And that's like your retirement goals, right? But much like planning a road trip, there needs to be some type of map, which is your financial plan. And you have regular check-ins. You may have a pit stop. You may have a time you want to eat. There may be times where you may want to take a shortcut, but you got to take a look to see whether that shortcut will have a pothole or two. Whether then it makes sense to go the long way around so you can still reach your destination. And that's referred to as adjustments. All of these are things that factors that you have to consider to make sure that you are on the right path to retirement. So then it therefore is important for us to save early or start saving early for retirement. And why is that? Because we want to be financially independent. We want to make sure that our savings are enough that you can live on comfortably without relying on others. And we all heard the term, being financially free, being financially independent. This is something that we can aspire to be even throughout retirement. So you may not need financial support from your children, but on the flip side, if there is no plan for retirement, we become dependent on others. We may become dependent on our parents at retirement. We may become dependent on our children or our grandchildren or family or friends who may now have their own responsibilities and quite possibly may not be in a position to help financially, physically, or be emotionally present or mentally capable of looking after you or looking out for you. Okay, healthcare costs. As you age, medical expenses typically may increase, not increase from a perspective of cost, but they become a little bit more, may come a little bit more often than now. All right, inflation. Inflation, the cost of living increases over time. We were able to see, especially during retirement, and especially through the pandemic, right, that the cost of living increased. Cost of bread went up, I don't know, maybe by $3 or $4. The cost of gas, I remember at that time, a lot of information was coming up about gas and diesel and the price changing ever so often, etc. All right, so that's a very real life example right there that all of us would have recently gone through. Longevity, people are living people are living longer now than before, which is requiring more funds to cover longer retirement periods so that you do not outlive your savings. Being able to maintain your lifestyle, maintain your current standard of living after retirement, being able to enjoy those hobbies and activities without financial stress. All right, travel and leisure. We would have mentioned those things before. Many persons wish to travel and pursue hobbies once they have retired. Providing for your children and grandchildren, maybe leaving a legacy for them. A legacy could be things like property and business and insurance proceeds, money, savings, things of that nature. Ensuring that all debts are paid off before retirement. And these are some of the things that come along with starting to save early. All right, and being able to cover unexpected expenses during retirement as well. And lastly, having a Social Security buffer. So something in addition to what Social Security will provide for you after retirement. All right, so that you're not relying solely on government benefits for retirement income. Okay, now I want to get into this because this depicts really what retirement planning is, or why it is considered as important. So on your screen, you will see a baseline. You will see some ages from age 20 all the way through until age 70 and beyond. And what we're seeing here is that as you start to work, maybe from your very first job, what typically happens with your income is that it increases. All right? Now, while your income increases, when you get to age of retirement, whether that's age 65, whether that's age 67, etc., is that your income decreases. And it remains at that reduced income level for the rest of your life. Now, what happens here is that it creates something called the gap. And this is when we refer to as gap analysis early in the presentation. This is the gap that we are referring to. Now, why is this gap something that we need to focus on? Because as your income was increasing, something else was also increasing along with your income, which we refer to as the cost of living. And the cost of living, as you would see here, does not reduce because your income has reduced. It continues to rise. And so that gap, when we're referring to planning for retirement, is the gap between reduced income and the cost of living continuing to increase. All right, so let me show you what happens if you have been saving from the very first time you had a job, or saving from as early as possible. What happens is that your reduced income may not be reduced by too much, and so the gap is not as wide. Okay? The cost of living will still increase, but this blue line here represents savings. So if you started to save from your very first job, what happens here is that you've been accumulating then income, you've been accumulating savings, you may have had some type of investments, and what that does, it is accumulates savings for retirement. All right, so that gap may still be there, but the gap may not be as wide. Okay, and this is the importance here of retirement planning. All right, that's why it's important to plan, to take a look at your expenses, your income, look at income sources, look at that, make sure that it can be paid off before you reach the age of retirement, things of that nature. Now we want to run another poll, and this next poll is going to be interesting because at this point in time, there may be some level of anxiety, there may be some level of, confidence, depending on where you're at with your retirement planning journey. And so you're going to see another screen pop up on your screen, which is going to ask the question, how confident are you that you will have enough savings to retire comfortably? All right, hit select answer, and there will be very confident. Are you feeling very confident that where you are in your retirement journey, retirement savings journey, will allow you to retire comfortably? Are you somewhat confident? Are you not very confident? Are you not confident at all? Right? So give you 10 seconds to answer the question, hit submit at the bottom, and then we will take a look at the results. And once again, here, you are not going to be able to see what your colleagues selected. What you will see when we share the results is who do you have in your corner or sitting next to you at work that may be sharing the same level of confidence as you are. All right, so if we all have that, if the results are all in, we can go ahead to share the results with everyone. Okay, so this is interesting because 10% of us are very confident, which is fantastic, right? It means that some of you are very confident that your savings journey for retirement allows you to feel very confident. But the larger percent of those who are on the call today feel somewhat confident. It means that a little bit more work can be done. It means that there's room for improvement. 34% of you say, well, I'm not feeling too confident. I'm not feeling very confident right now, which means that adjustments may need to be made. All right, maybe a difference in perspective as it relates to retirement planning. You may need to have an assessment being done, right, on your expenses, on your debt management, on income, on diversifying your portfolio. Some adjustment may need to be made there. And then 18% of you said, I am not feeling very confident at all. All right. Now, it may be because you may think you have time. It may be because you have additional income, but you're not sure what to do with it. It may be because you're not sure where to invest, where to diversify. It may mean that some research may need to be done. Okay, but you can make a start. You can make a start by doing some research and finding out what is the best thing to do to save for the gap. All right, good. Now let us move on. Because what we want to do as we come down to the end of today's presentation is to take a look or overview of the retirement planning process. So this first thing we want to do is to assess your current financial situation, right? We want to evaluate your income, your expenses, your assets, your debt, your liabilities, things of that nature. You want to be able to set your retirement goal, determine the necessary retirement age, determine the lifestyle you're looking to live, if it is going to be comfortable, if it is going to be luxury, if it's going to be a dependent lifestyle, what financial needs will come along with that lifestyle. You want to also estimate your retirement expenses. So considering housing and healthcare and daily living expenses and financial obligations, we want to take a look at those financial needs. We also want to understand and estimate retirement expenses. So what comes along with retiring? Social Security, pensions, investments, those are your income options at retirement. All right, will I then have to still go and look for part-time work after I have retired? Right, we want to be able to create a savings, investment plans, take a look at the benefits, take a look at projections, see where it will get me with the time I have left before I retire. And we want to monitor and adjust those plans regularly, right? And adjust plans based on changing circumstances. So if you get a raise at work, you get a promotion, increase in pay, things of that nature, you may say to yourself, well, I don't want to be putting all my eggs in one basket. I don't want to be just adjusting one particular account, one particular savings, one particular policy, one particular bank account. You want to be able to diversify. Put a little bit everywhere. All right. Now you may be saying to yourself, what do I need? What is the goal? What is the intention? No, these are your funds. This is your income. This is your retirement. All right. You want to be able to make sure that every step gets you closer towards your goal. Does it require $150? Does it require $450? Does it require $25? Does it require $1,000? What is considered as a start? Okay, and that can only be done by doing a financial assessment. What is your goal? How much is enough? How do I know what to plan towards? How do I know how much I should have accumulated by the time I reach the age of retirement? So what I want to encourage you to do is to plant a seed today to provide shade for the future. All right? Plant a seed today to provide shade for the future. Because when you do that, and you are able to accumulate your retirement fund, your retirement savings, it allows you the financial freedom to do and live a lifestyle that you have always been maybe dreaming about, planning for, etc., so that you can enjoy that honeymoon phase for a very long period of time. Yeah. So the importance of saving here, there are a couple of questions that I want to, not for you to answer, but for you to think about. Right? Could you retire tomorrow and have a financially comfortable life? All right. And if not, why not? And how do you change that? What happens if retirement came involuntarily due to an accident, an injury, an illness, or disability? How does that affect your lifestyle? How does that affect those who depend on you? Can you survive on 30% or 40% of your current salary? What happens to the first couple of months after you retire? How much do your savings currently last you, or how long will they last you if you're feeling very confident about your retirement planning journey right now? Will you have to rely on family? Will you have to rely on friends? Will you go into debt? Will you even struggle? Will you just be okay? Is that what you're working so hard for right now? What do you envision your retirement lifestyle to be? Wouldn't you like to enjoy your home? peace and quiet, the ability to sleep in, leave home without having traffic, not having to depend on someone else for transportation, the freedom of traveling without having to ask for time off or for vacation days or early holiday pay. How will you afford it all? Do you think that you deserve it? You should. You should feel that you deserve it. Will expenses decrease? Will you be in good health? Will Social Security on its own be enough, or should I build a buffer? Can it depend on 100? If I depend on 100% of my paycheck today, how do I survive on 30, 40, 50, 60% of my income? All right, so right now we just want to recap on the things that we would have gone through today, which is phases of retirement planning, pre-retirement planning, which is where we're at right now, the actual retirement day, finality, and then moving on, much like graduation for a child, but then you still want to be able to enjoy the years that come after that as comfortably as possible. The honeymoon phase, may that last as long as possible. Disenchantment, may this not last as long as the honeymoon phase, right? Reorientation, where you're finding yourself again, building new passions, being financially stable. Understanding and examining the basics of retirement planning, which involves setting your retirement goals, assessing your current financial situation, estimating your retirement needs, researching your savings options, understanding Social Security benefits, considering healthcare options, your estate, which is assets and liabilities, monitoring and reviewing your financial portfolio regularly, whether that means checking in every single day, whether that means checking in monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. And remember that there are factors to consider to determine your retirement goals, like financial independence, healthcare, inflation, the gap. If there's nothing else we take away from today, is remembering the gap. Remember that that gap is what you are planning for. All right? The lifestyle that comes along with that. Traveling, activities, community events, being able to still dress nicely, getting your hair done, getting your hair cut, whatever it is. What does your retirement goal or goals look like? Being debt-free, preparing for unexpected expenses. All right? I want you to think of yourself maybe as John, having the ability to live out his achieved goal by being disciplined, by being educated, consistent, making sacrifices, so that when you get to the age of retirement, you are able to enjoy those years with your spouse, yourself, your children, your grandchildren, and be financially comfortable. All right. Now, at this time, I would like to say a huge thank you to all 172 of you who participated in today's webinar. I would also like to encourage you to take the steps towards taking the future seriously, not only for retirement, but for every tomorrow that comes. All right. You are an awesome virtual audience and would like to hear your questions. And so right now we will have a few minutes left for question and answer. And at this time, I'll be handing back over to the host of today's session, Miss Sheila Rosette. Sheila?
Thank you so very much, Gail. So colleagues, it's now the question and answer segment for today's presentation. And this is the time that we get to hear from you. So I'm inviting you to post any questions, comments, queries, observations in the Q&A. And the Q&A icon you will see at the bottom of your screen. I see one question posted already. So we will read that for Gail and she can answer. And it came from Cheryl Lewis. She wanted to find out, is there a percentage allowance for inflation when calculating retirement goals? $1,000 in 2000 has less value than in 2024.
That is correct. And that is a great question. Based on statistics, we can say that inflation on average has a 4% increase per year. All right, some years may be different from other years. I'm pretty sure that this information is also available by the central bank for Barbados specifically. So again, this is where research now comes in, where you're able to go and check to see what has inflation or how has inflation affected individuals' purchasing power over the last 5 years or over the last 10 years. Now, typically, statistics may say what has happened in the past could be used as statistics to use for the future. All right. While that may not always be correct, it gives you some indication of what the future would look like with regards to inflation. So I'm glad you asked that question. Thank you.
Thank you to Gail. There's another question posted relating to inflation. It says, how realistic can your plan and contingency plan be made to work around inflation?
Okay, so as I would have mentioned before, I'm not here to answer or give advice specific to a person's individual circumstances. However, what I would say is that a good rule of thumb is to invest or save at least 10% of your income. All right. Now, depending on your age, depending on how much time you have before retirement, will determine whether 10% will be enough, whether it's considered as too much, depending on your own financial situation, your financial obligations, etc., between now and the age of retirement. All right, but the good rule of thumb there is about 10% to be able to save for contingency plans, your regular financial obligations after retirement. But again, it depends on the time frame on your retirement goal based on, retirement age and so on. Hope that answers the question.
Okay, we move on. There's another question. If I only have 5 years before retirement and a little savings, is there any hope of filling the gap?
There is always hope. There is always hope. So when we take a look at your income, we take a look at your expenses, we take a look at Social Security and the estimated amount that you should be receiving at retirement, then we'll be able to also consider how much you currently have saved. You may consider it as a little, right? To see what needs to be done between now and the next 5 years in order to know whether it will be considered as enough, whether it will involve reassessing what your retirement needs or your retirement income or your expenses after retirement, how those things will be handled. So there is always hope. To have something is better than to have nothing, and to make a start is better than doing nothing at all. All right. So I hope that answers your question, gives you a little bit more confidence about looking forward to retirement.
Thank you, Gail. Okay. Another question has been posted. If retirement planning is so involved, my screen shifted. If retirement planning is so involved, why is the pension taxed? How can allowance be made for this?
I don't think I'm in a position to answer why pension is taxed. That may not be a question for this forum, but how allowance can be made for that is to make sure that you have something so that whether pension is taxed or not, that you have something individually for yourself. If you have pension income from security, that is your bonus. That is something on top of, that comes on top of your buffer that you have made for yourself, planning for yourself for retirement. So that's something, that's assessment that would need to be made for yourself individually to make sure that you have something for yourself or pension, regardless of anything else that's going on outside of that. All right, so I hope that answers the question. I'm not able to speak to the pension being taxed at this time.
Okay. Another question that I see posted is, what is the average percentage of salary that is recommended to be planned for as a monthly retirement income?
Sorry, Sheila, I think you broke up a bit there just now. Could you repeat the question for me?
Sorry about that. What is the average percentage of salary that is recommended to be planned for as a monthly retirement income?
Fantastic question. So I think you would have touched on this just now. A good rule of thumb for retirement is between 5 to 10%, 5 to 10% of your current income. All right, anything more than 10% would depend heavily on if you have debts, what your financial obligations are from month to month. We've introduced individuals to something called the 50-30-20 rule, where 20% takes care of savings, and of that 20%, 10% goes towards retirement. But again, this is not necessarily wide or general advice. This is just based on the question specific to how much should be going towards retirement. This obviously would depend heavily on an individual's current financial situation. All right.
Okay, we move on. Which is better, registered or unregistered retirement saving plans?
All righty. So registered retirement savings plans are typically taxed. All right. So that's one thing to be aware of. And unregistered retirement savings plans are typically not taxed. It depends on, again, where these are and if they need to be utilized, if they need to be withdrawn from prior to the age of retirement. So typically a registered savings plan cannot be utilized prior to the age of retirement, or in some circumstances, depending on the institution, the financial institution, there may be a set age in which before it can be used. So that age may be as early as age 55, it could be age 60, 65, age 70, depending on the institution. Generally, it cannot be used, withdrawn from, etc., prior to the age of retirement, which calls for, that level of discipline, etc. And registered would mean that they are typically not taxed. They may be able to be utilized and so on, but there may be some stipulations as well concerning fees and withdrawals and that kind of stuff prior to retirement age. All right, so I hope I answered the question. One is, if one is better than the other, depends on your current situation and what it is, typically being used for.
There's another question in relation to retirement plans in terms of what are the interest rates on retirement plans?
Interest rates on retirement plans vary from company to company or institution to institution. So right now, interest rates are typically between 2%, 3%, 4.5%. Some may go up as high as 6%. Again, depending on the institution that they're invested with. I'm not sure whether there are companies that may have retirement plans that have interest rates higher than 6.5%. Right? But generally, I would say between 2.5%, 2.5%, and 5%.
And again, another question about retirement savings plans. Are they only taxed if withdrawn? Sorry, are the RRSPs only taxed if withdrawn before used? If kept until retirement, are they still taxed?
Okay, so for the first part of that question, repeat the first part of the question again.
It's about taxation. If you withdraw from your registered retirement savings plan before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you do seek to withdraw from the registered retirement savings plan prior to the retirement age, there will be taxes. There will be taxes that are applied to the fund, and possibly withdrawal fees as well. You're saying then that the second part of the question is if you keep it until retirement, if it is still taxed, typically no. So once the retirement plan is up to maturity date and you are looking then to withdraw from the fund, that fund then should not be taxed at retirement age. Again, this varies based on company to company and the rules and regulations surrounding each financial institution and their retirement plans. All right.
Okay, I see another question posted in the chat. Can you speak to the recent changes to the retirement dates and eligibility periods and whether it will impact persons already in government, example, for over 20 years? I believe that we will speak to Social Security in our second session. Do you want to tackle this
That would
question
be
now?
correct. Yes, we do have more information coming specifically on Social Security in the next session. So that may be a question that I may want rolled over into the next session. However, what I would say is that the changes are currently being made. So with those changes being made, there may be some changes as it relates to eligibility as well, where the current retirement age right now is at age 67. However, if you choose to retire earlier than age 67 is considered as early retirement. I know right now that you lose 6% per year prior to retirement. So if you are looking to retire at age 66 before age 67, that's 1 year, you lose 6% of your pension, Social Security pension, and it doesn't go back up when you reach age 67. So that's one of the things you may want to take into consideration. But again, more information is coming on that specific question in episode 2.
We're just going to take a few more questions. Is an endowment plan better than a pension plan?
That's a good question. I do not want to speak specifically to whether it is better than or not, because here again, an endowment is one that would accumulate to have funds available to you at the age of maturity, at the date of maturity. However, you have to be able to determine whether an endowment will be enough or whether a pension plan will be enough. So if a pension plan is not going to be enough and you're going the route of an endowment because it will give you what you have asked for, right? Then that may be the better option for you. If it is not going to be the better option for you, then you need to find something that is going to be the best option based on your specific circumstances. All right, so when a financial assessment is done and is completed, then and only then would you be able to make an informed decision based on how much you know you need to fill within the gap to make sure that your estimated accumulation at age 65 or age 67 will be enough to take you through the next 10 years, 20 years, possibly 30 years after retirement. All right.
Okay, and this will be the final question, although I think it will kind of lead into our next discussion. Next week, Thursday, what percentage of your salary becomes your pension when retired?
That's a very interesting question, and that will also come up in the next session, like you said, Sheila. this depends on a number of factors. It depends on at what age or how long ago did you start to contribute towards pension, whether that's private pension or whether that's NAS pension. All right. It depends on the number of contributions you do have in. It also depends on the best 5 years of your working years that you've been contributing towards pension. It also depends on what age you're looking to retire. So a lot of this information will come in the next session. And this question should probably give you a little bit more clarity on what your salary or what percentage of your salary becomes your pension when you're retired. In attending or listening or doing research as it relates to pension from Social Security, I understand that you probably could estimate around 30%, 40%, 50%, or even up to 60%, depending on your best 5 years. There is a ceiling, though, as it relates to how much is considered as insurable earnings with Social Security. And that ceiling right now is up to $5,200. All right. Now, $5,200 being the ceiling, if there are individuals who are currently earning more than $5,200, I want you to understand that $5,200 becomes the ceiling, which means that it is a percentage of up to $5,200 that's considered for eligible pension or eligible Social Security pension, which means that there may be some gaps in there that may need to be filled privately as it relates to planning for a pension. All right, so I hope that that answers that question, but some more information specific to that question will be coming on the next session.
Okay, so we've come to the end of our webinar presentation for today. Gail, thank you so very much for availing of your time today to engage us on this important area, which is so very critical to each employee, no matter which post you occupy in the public service. To you, the attendees, I thank you very much for your contributions. The questions that remain unanswered will be passed to the facilitator, and she will provide responses which will be shared with you via email. Please stay a few minutes more to complete our evaluation form, and the link to this form is going to be placed in the chat. We thank you in advance for your feedback, which we value immensely. Also, placed in the chat will be the link to register for the second session in this webinar series. We're going to continue our discussion on retirement planning next Thursday, July the 4th, right here on Zoom. So the session will remain open to allow you to complete the evaluation form and to access the registration link. So thank you so very much again for joining us and taking the time to join us today. And we hope that the information shared was of value to you as you contemplate or undertake planning for retirement. Remember, financial security in retirement does not just happen. It takes planning and preparation. And making a plan helps you to cope better with life at that stage of your life. On behalf of the Learning and Development Directorate, I take this opportunity to wish you a pleasant and productive remainder of the day. And as was said before, we will keep this session open to allow for the completion of the evaluation form and for you to access the registration link for next week's session.